Anytime. Hey, what's up, horror fans? Pete here from the Lassercast, where me and my good friend Danny over there talk about horror films from all the different decades, horror streaming shows, and just have an overall good time. We just wrapped up our M. Night Shyamalan of Summer event, where we covered 6 movies by M. Night Shyamalan. Make sure we covered the movie Trap, that's just in theaters. Now, we covered 6 other movies in a series, the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. According to Danny, these are like the 6 like watchable movies of the series. And so, Danny,
Debatable.
yeah, it seems like for the 2 that we're covering today, our final 2, the Platinum Dunes Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, it seems like your tune might have changed a little bit from when we were discussing them and then when you rewatch them. Is that true at all?
So I think what I had said last time is that a lot of people really like the remake, to the point where
Yeah.
I've seen people rank the remake above the original.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't know if I ever said I like the remake.
Okay.
So my opinion of these 2 movies has not changed.
Okay.
I did not like them in 2003 and 2006.
Yes.
I do not like them in 2024.
I would not eat them on a plane. I would not eat them on a train.
I would not watch them with my fam. I would not eat them
Sam I am
with a girl named Pam. Yeah,
there you go. She probably got eaten.
I'm not a huge fan of these movies. I think they basically miss the point of what the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was.
Yeah.
And the 2003 remake has some really nice shots in it. The cinematographer is Daniel Pearl. He's the actual cinematographer from the first movie.
That's right. Yeah.
The director is a Michael Bay production, of course. So
Right.
It comes as no surprise that the director is a music video director. That's where Michael Bay got his start. Marcus Nispel was a very popular, very successful music video director.
Yeah.
And there's parts of the movie that feel like I'm watching a music video.
Yeah.
But what I love so much about the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre,
yeah,
and why I think it has stood the test of time, and when I say it stood the test of time, I officially now can say I've purchased my tickets, and next Thursday on August 8th, I am going with Charlotte to the Museum of Modern Art in New York City.
Yes.
To see the Texas Chainsaw Massacre for its 50th anniversary.
Yeah.
Daniel Pearl will be there. Kim Henkel, the original writer and the director of Texas Chainsaw 4, will be there. Terry McMinn, who plays, I believe, Pam in the original movie, the one who gets put on the meat hook, she will be there. They're doing this big celebration, and this is at the Museum of Modern Art. Yeah. And so why the first movie has stood the test of time is because of when you're watching it, you don't think that it's something you should be watching.
Right.
It feels wrong. It feels dirty. It feels real. It feels almost, especially the last 30 minutes, like you're watching a snuff film. Right. And you're just like, you are in the craziness of everything. And it felt like in 2002, 2003, Platinum Dunes was like, look, let's remake Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let's make it, super sleek, super sexy. We'll hire these hot young actors. We'll up the gore. They don't add anything to the movie, with the exception of, I will say, Arlie Ermy, I guess, his character
Right.
is, he's more of a, they make it, they make it meaner in a way,
Yes.
which is weird because of how the original is,
Right.
but it just doesn't have any of the charm that the original movie has.
Yes.
And I watched this a couple days ago, and I was texting my friend Jared, who I play trivia with, and he's a bigger horror movie fan than I am.
Whoa.
And his comment to me, his text to me was, "Yeah, those are really just soulless movies." And I kind of was like, "Yeah, they really do feel soulless. Like there's, and so I don't know. I think they're better made films.
Yeah.
They're much more competently made films than parts 3 and 4,
Right.
and the movies that we're not covering, which are really bad.
Right.
Um,
Right.
but I'll give you one thing that struck me really quickly. The dialogue in this movie does not feel time appropriate. It
Right.
feels like the characters in both movies, the
Yeah.
characters I feel like talk like it's the 90s or the 2000s for a movie that's set in 1973.
Right.
They felt the need to bring John Larroquette back so that once again we get the same old intro with the, and this time they intersperse it with crime scene investigation stuff, which I don't think this movie needed. It kind of makes it feel weird,
Yeah.
that they're, because like part of the charm of the original movie was the movie ends, Sally gets into that truck, she gets away, and that's it. And there's no follow up. There's no nothing. And there's
Yeah.
nothing until 13 years later when we get part 2. And it just feels, I don't know. I know people love this movie. I feel like if I were single and if I was like on a dating app and somebody, you ever see those like memes where it's like, I love you too. What's your favorite movie? And then somebody says something and like the character like pushes them off like a cliff.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
feel
Yeah.
like if like I was out like on a first date and it was going great and she was hot and we were talking about horror movies, and if like she was like, Texas Chainsaw 2003 is so much better than the original, I'd be like, so where do you live? I'm going to drop you off.
Right. Right. Jesus.
And I'd probably just not call her again. Like that would be a deal breaker for me. And like, yeah, I don't even like, yeah, it's funny that you put that on the crawl that the director thought it would be blasphemy to remake the original, but then he got talked into it by the original cinematographer, which is funny.
Right. Right. Well, so okay, I used to write for a website called Bloody Good Horror, and I was there for a very short period of time. It's probably not even right for me to call back to this. I had a thing called Comics Creep Show where I reviewed horror comics on there, and then every so often I would go see movies and then give my review of the movies as well. And one of them was the Platinum Dunes Friday the 13th movie, which is directed by this director as well. Um, I actually gave that movie a really good review. And then the people that like run the channel that did the podcast, boy, they ripped into that movie and they didn't like it. And I felt like so embarrassed because I had given that movie a good review. Now, watching, I mean, that was fucking like 2006 or something. So a lot of times passed.
2009, I think.
Oh, okay. Yeah. All right. Okay. So, but still, I mean, it's a long time ago.
Yeah.
And I've watched way, way more horror movies since then, and I've had hours and hours of conversations with you about horror movies. So I see what they were saying then, but what's weird to me, like, because you said that this movie was soulless, and I understand that it does definitely feel like like it's a cash grab and it's set up the way that you described it. What is interesting to me is that they try to do things that, like, I'm not going to say improve upon the flaws of the previous movies, but they seem to be like competent ways of doing things that were incompetent in the sequels, right? Like if I was to rank the Texas Chainsaw movies now, I would rank number one as the first one, just like people do with Alien and Die Hard and all that kind of stuff. It's like, that's the first one. That's the best one, right? Then I would rank number two as my favorite, just because I like that one a lot. And it's weird as hell, but it's still like real enjoyable and fun. And they're both Toby Hooper. But then we've watched 6 movies. I think I would rank these 2 movies higher than 3 and 4.
I think they're better made movies than 3 and 4. I think,
right.
You know, we talked about this when we covered part 3. Jeff Burr did not have a lot of control over that movie. He even said in interviews he was like the 9th choice to direct. The studio, the MPAA ripped that movie apart, and it ends up feeling choppy and weird. And then part 4 is just an utter insane, ridiculous movie. I would probably rank these 2 movies ahead of those 2 movies also, just because they're more competently made movies. So I'll be positive for a second. There are 2 scenes in the 2003 remake that I think are legitimately great. One is, and this has been talked about many times on many other channels, the after the girl in the car commits suicide, there's this amazing camera shot that pulls back through the hole in her head, which is unbelievable. That is like a fucking unbelievable camera trick that they did there.
Right.
Love that shot. And the other shot in this movie that I think will stand the test of time is after Jessica Biel's boyfriend is the first person to be killed. Leatherface takes his face off and uses it as a mask, and he becomes Eric Balfour.
Right.
I do find it funny that these 2 movies completely eliminate any androgyny behind the Leatherface character,
Agreed.
which was there from the original. But he kills the 2 best looking guys in both movies and takes their face.
Yeah.
So when I was watching the beginning, I was like, look, if I could look like Matt Bomer, I'd probably take his face too. I mean, let's be realistic.
He's
Eric
a good looking.
Balfour was in like the first episode ever of Buffy. I don't know if you remember. He was in the very first episode of Buffy. He's like one of the Scooby Gang, and he gets turned into a vampire and killed, and he's never discussed again. And I always like jokingly talk about that with Athena, because she's the biggest Buffy fan I know. She got me into Buffy and Angel and rewatched the series 6 different times. It's on like Fuse TV, and every time I go into the living room, Athena and Charlotte are just watching Buffy.
Right.
And I'm always like, remember when Eric Balfour was part of the Scooby Gang and he got turned into a vampire and killed, and then like the next day nobody even held like a memorial or ever said his name again? Like, that's funny.
Yeah.
He
was also
Kemper.
in 6 Feet Under. I mean, he's in a lot of things, but I always remember.
Yeah, he does play the boyfriend in 6 Feet Under. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's like one of those guys. He was in like Dino Shark, I think, back when I was in my Sci-Fi Channel shark movie phase.
Oh yeah.
But that scene where Leatherface turns around and he's got his fucking face on, that is fucking awesome. That is a legit great moment.
Yeah. I think that, like, you know, him and Jessica Biel are likable. And I think that, like, Jessica Biel, she's the most likable girl in this franchise. I haven't seen the ones that we haven't discussed, but I'm guessing that the girls in that aren't that great either. But I didn't really like Renee Zellweger in the fourth one, and then I can't remember the fucking name of the actress or the character in the third one. That was the girl. So I feel like Jessica Biel is the most likable final girl in this franchise since Stretch, you know? And go ahead.
No, since Stretch, yeah. I mean, I think that part of what made Sally Marilyn Burns in the original is that she predates the concept of the final girl.
Right.
She's not Sidney Prescott. She's not Nancy Thompson. She's not Laurie Strode. She's just a girl who is in the worst possible situation. And she doesn't outsmart anybody. She doesn't overpower anybody. She doesn't build booby traps or fight back. She escapes.
Yeah.
She does the bare minimum to escape this situation. And she's able to survive because of a conflagrance of circumstances.
Yeah.
You know, a truck happens to be going down the road that mows down the hitchhiker. This other guy in a Jeep pulls up and she's able to hop in the back. So she's not the traditional final girl the way we would come to know what a final girl is.
Right.
So Stretch is. She fights back. She overpowers. She is coming at them with weapons. She is very much a final girl, whereas and so is Jessica Biel in this movie.
Yeah.
To the point where, I mean, like, at the end of the movie, she literally hacks off Leatherface's arm.
Yeah.
My biggest problem with these two movies is the character of Leatherface, though.
Okay.
Because I think that they made a decision in these movies. We've mentioned this, that Leatherface, especially in the original, he's obviously a challenged adult who is not this bulking horror villain as much as he is a scared, almost infantile creature who happens to be massive, who is freaking out when people invade his home. And he's also a cannibal who is preparing dinner for his family, who he is abused by. The makers of these movies decided, fuck no, Leatherface is Jason. Right. And Leatherface is going to be this massive, hulking, almost super villain, powerful character who looks like a monster and is powerful like a monster. And there's almost no scenes whatsoever there's one scene where he like sits down in the 2003 movie. But for really, especially you go back to the beginning, the 2006 prequel, he's effectively just this violent, massive, unstoppable psychopath.
Yeah.
And I texted you a picture. He reminded me of like a wrestler from this wrestling company called Total Nonstop Action, TNA.
Yeah.
That named Abyss, or you might even know from WWE, Kane.
Mankind?
Yeah, he looks like he's wearing the Mankind mask, but he's the size of Kane.
Yeah.
And that is, for me, that's like this total departure from like what Leatherface was in the original. And it made me feel like they don't really get Leatherface. And I thought that they could have done so much more with him as a sympathetic character because he's surrounded by R. Lee Ermey, who is so fucking evil. R. Lee Ermey is one of the things that separates this from the original movie. Yeah. And I would say in a positive way, because he's such an infamously known actor from Full Metal Jacket. The Frighteners. He is a guy whose entire career is, I'm just going to be R. Lee Ermey in this movie.
Right.
And I'm going to talk down to you, and I'm going to belittle you, and I'm going to say all these crazy, mean, and it just so happens that in this movie, he is that sadistic, evil, monster who now has this, Jason-esque supervillain character behind him. I also another positive I'll give this movie. I love the way the house looks, and I love the way the house gets framed in like. I love the original house, and I'd love to go there with you for dinner one night in Texas.
Totally
But
agree.
this house, I think, is much bigger in scope. I don't like the basement. I think the basement is weird. How it's like they live in the Texas heat, but there's all this like water dripping around, and it's like a soupy, like everybody's standing in puddles. I don't know that.
Well, I
I
mean,
don't
okay,
like the
so
production design of that.
one thing I want to say to that is when you watch these movies and you live here where I do, they mention how like Travis County sheriffs. And I live in Travis County, so it's kind of weird to like hear them mention that. But there's no fucking basements here, okay, like at all. So regardless of them being filled with water, there's no basements, you know. So it's like it's just weird to begin with. And you know, the next movie coming up is more like the Batman Begins of Leatherface, right? Where it like shows how certain things, oh, that's where he gets the first mask, that's where he gets the chainsaw, that's where he gets you know, like that's when they become cannibals. But this movie doesn't have that as much. But it's just like he's more of like a villain, like you're saying, and like that's like his lair down there. Whereas I mean, that's one thing I kind of wanted to talk about too, is that in both of these Platinum Dunes movies, there's a distinction between the way the people dress and look and talk and the way that the house looks too. In the original movies, everything is like to an 11, where like they're using fucking furniture made out of bones, and you know there's like flesh all over the place. And the people are just so over the top with how they talk, what they say, what they do. Here, the family, the Hewitt family that we see, they seem much more realistic. Like it's like, okay, they're evil and it's like fucked up, but like they could kind of exist. Whereas in the other movie, it's just like so fucking over the top and bizarre,
Yeah.
you know?
I also don't. The thing that really bugs me about the beginning, the 2006 prequel, is it feels like the movie was specifically made for people who have no subtextual ability whatsoever. Like, where it's like, oh, let's make a movie where we explain literally every detail
Oh,
of
you know, I
how the
love that.
people in the movie 3 years ago came to be.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I hate that in the 2003 movie, Leatherface takes off his mask and he's a deformed. And then they go into
Yeah, it looks
graphic
like an orc.
detail to explain that he's born hideous and he has this skin condition. Gunnar Hansen was just wearing a mask that looked like it was made of fucking skin, and his teeth were all messed up, and we don't know anything else about him other than he has multiple different masks that he puts on made of human skin. This movie, I don't even like the mask. I think the mask looks too evil. I think Leatherface just looks like the first time you see him, and then like the first time he pulls the door back and he's got the chainsaw, he looks like this unnaturally, like that looks like something that somebody would dress up as for Halloween Horror Nights.
Yeah.
Whereas instead of it being the Leatherface that we know. And I also thought it was interesting that, like you were saying, the 1974 movie, the dining room, the bones, the animals, the couch made of human bones. Then you go into the dining room. You have a lamp with a human face on it. The chair has arms attached to it. It was based on the Ed Gein story out of Wisconsin. This movie, the remake, has no dinner scene. It has no cannibalism in it. And then they retrofit that in the prequel. And they're like, oh, they are cannibals. They are. We didn't mention it in a movie that takes place 4 years later, but they are. Look, here, they're going to start eating humans, they decided.
Yeah.
And also will give you a dinner scene with people at the dinner table.
Right.
And it's like they went out of their way to like expand the family, to add women to the family. I thought that was one of the really bizarre things of the original movie, is that it's 3 males, actually 4 because of grandpa, and there's like the rotting corpse of grandma upstairs, but there's no other women around.
Right.
And in this movie, there's the woman who owns the store with the rotting meat. There's the big woman. There's the other woman
lady
who has the stolen baby.
Yeah, Henrietta.
It's like let's make this a giant big redneck, cannibal family.
Right.
And again, it's like sometimes you don't need to know every single detail. I don't need to know why Leatherface chooses to cover his face. I don't need to know why, how Sheriff Hoyt became Sheriff Hoyt. I don't need to know how the guy with no legs lost his legs.
Yeah.
These aren't details that I walked out of the 2003 movie going, man, I wonder, how did he lose his legs? I hope they cover that in a prequel.
Right. Well, I mean, just like comic books. So, I got my other channel, Comic Books Transformed. Comics go through these phases. There's these trends, and they last like about a decade or so. And I mean, horror movies absolutely do this as well. And I guess like sci-fi, all genre stuff goes through these trends where they kind of mimic certain movies that were like outlier movies. And I think that like with Batman Begins and then The Dark Knight, those really profoundly affected genre films, whether they were horror, comic book, anything. And I think like the idea of like, we're going to explain how this thing that when you're first introduced to it in its original form, in this case, the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre movie from the 70s, right? We're going to explain how that would come to be in the real world. And a lot of people would argue it's not necessary. Like, why do we need to know how this would come to be in the real world? And then when we see it in this new version, it's like a much more grounded version of it, but it's interesting, like the behind the scenes, the people that were writing it and stuff. This first one, and we can start going into the second one now too. The first one was written by Scott Kozer, who wrote the movie The Machinist. I'm actually a huge fan of The Machinist. Speaking of Batman, Christian Bale is in that movie. And then he also wrote the Amityville Horror movie from 2005, which I think that wasn't really a successful movie with Ryan Reynolds. And that's also
the street by 2427.
That's also a Platinum Dunes remake as well. So he wrote that one. Then if we transition over to the prequel, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. You already mentioned Jonathan Liebsman. He directed like Wrath of the Titans and Battle LA or whatever, and he did the Ninja Turtles movie from 2014. The screenplay for the second one was written by David J. Scow, and he's the one that wrote the number 3 in this 3. Yeah. But then he also wrote fucking like Up in the Air. Oh no, fuck that. He didn't write that. He's a horror writer. The guy that
he
worked
did The Crow.
Yes. So that is a comic book thing too. But the guy that wrote this with him, the second one, he wrote Up in the Air and X-Men First Class. That's actually my favorite X-Men movie too, besides Logan. So I mean, you have these interesting people behind the scenes. And when I was doing a little bit of digging, Jessica Biel, they were going to have her character be 9 months pregnant in that first movie. That would have changed the whole dynamic too. But the second one deals with a birth right in the very beginning. Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning, we see Leatherface's birth. So once again, we're over-explaining things. He's born. There's something weird about him when he's born. His mom gives birth to him in a fucking slaughterhouse. I see you chuckling over there. What's up?
No, I'm just like, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the beginning. I wonder, how was he born? Where was he born? If he was born in a slaughterhouse, it's almost as if he should be there forever. Like,
right. It's like that Patton Oswalt routine where he talks about the prequels, where it's like, "Oh, do you like Darth Vader? Oh, would you like to see him as a kid?" Have you ever seen that routine?
Yes.
Yeah. So it's like, "Oh, you like Leatherface? He's scary, right? Want to see him be born in a slaughterhouse, right?" So, I mean, we do get Sheriff Hoyt's origin, and we don't have to go into detail. I noticed we kind of like skipped like a lot of the kills and stuff from the last movie. And also the last movie I gotta give credit because it has a girl named Pepper in it, and my daughter's name is Pepper. Poor
Yes.
Pepper doesn't have that good of an ending in the last movie. But what I was gonna say about this next one, what I wanted to touch about, which is I think is kind of interesting about the second one, is the idea of the Vietnam War and Texas Chainsaw Massacre. See, Vietnam's mentioned in the original movie, right?
So I don't know if it's actually explicitly mentioned, but um, a lot of the lore behind it is tied to Vietnam, and I think it was the hitchhiker was supposed to be like a veteran, um, and in part two, obviously Chop Top, uh, that the metal plate,
Right.
that he got that in Vietnam. And like I think also just like the time period of the original movie being 1974, coming out so soon after 1968, which is universally considered to be like the year that changed America, the killing of RFK and Martin Luther King, and the explosion of troops into Vietnam. And by the early 70s, when the war was not going our way, you started to see that really played out across cinema, where like movies like Easy Rider and the Night of the Living Dead, like kind of brought that home. That like there's this like loss, like this loss of the loss of America.
Yeah.
Um, and we need to like find the new America again. And I think that idea was a lot in the original.
Yeah.
Um, I know that in the prequel that comes up a lot with the whole Matt Bomer is on his way back to Vietnam. His brother wants to dodge the draft and go with his girlfriend to Mexico. And that plays into Sheriff Hoyt's like torture of them and everything. But again, that kind of just felt like, oh, this is something we have to do because there had been allusions to it in the original movies.
Yes, I agree, but I want to give them a little bit more credit than that, though. I think that it actually strengthens the story because you have the one brother who doesn't want to go to Vietnam. He doesn't see like the value in it, or he thinks it's wrong to go there, and he's lying to his brother. So there's that kind of tension, whether it like really pays off or it's really well acted. There is that tension of like, oh, I can't reveal to my brother that I'm actually going to like burn my draft card and try to like go to Mexico. And then it's revealed eventually right before the shit hits the fans. But the idea of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and I think maybe like Mike Vendorno might appreciate this too, I think is that like the idea of Vietnam itself is, we go into Vietnam, we think of ourselves in one way as an American fighting force, and then there's these like guerrilla tactics that like wear us down, that take out so many of our soldiers. We're not expecting the world that we're going into. And I feel like Texas Chainsaw Massacre itself is like a metaphor for that. Because like you go into this place where the family is, and you have no idea what it is like. And in Texas Chainsaw Massacre, they're not even aware they're in danger. And then it's like a whole nother fucking world where they're cannibals and they use body parts for different things, and it doesn't make sense to you. And so I think that this movie, the second one, the beginning, really capitalizes on that because it's like, oh, you think Vietnam is bad? Where do you go to fucking Texas? That's where it's
Yeah.
really fucking scary. And so
I love that you as a Texan can say that.
right. Exactly. And so I think that like that's a clever thing to play with, is the idea of like we're so scared of going to Vietnam that there's even scarier shit here that we have to face. And like you said before, Sheriff Hoyt, like exploits that. He tortures them. You know, we talk about how these movies are soulless, but there are things that I like in this movie, like the brother Dean, Matt Brothers,
I'll just be
Matt
right back.
Bomer.
Keep going. Keep going.
Yeah, Matt Bomer's brother. He's the one that is going to be a draft dodger. And once Hoyt finds out about it, he takes like a nightstick and he starts beating Dean over the back with a nightstick as he's doing push-ups. He says, "Give me 10 push-ups and you can be free." And he's beating him with a nightstick. He takes like saran wrap and he puts it over Matt Bomer's face, and he's like, you know, making him suffocate when he thinks he's the draft dodger. So I think like that is interesting stuff. It's exciting stuff. It gives it more depth than a lot of the sequels of this franchise. And then like there are other additions. Like I think the Tea Lady is weird, and I think that like Henrietta in the 2003 one kind of is giving off like Anne Heche vibes from I Know What You Did Last Summer, you know?
Yeah.
Which that's like a classic thing. But I don't know. I mean, I even like the guy that's in the wheelchair in these two movies, and we see why he gets put in the wheelchair. We didn't need to see why, but
I just think that you're bringing up the extended family. I think that aside from Arlie Ermy, who adds a ton to these movies, without him, these movies are for me, they're like almost unwatchable.
Damn.
But aside from him, none of these other characters have any of the charm that the hitchhiker and Drayton and Chop Top and even Grandpa do. Like Grandpa is like this withered corpse, and then all of a sudden in the original he's alive, and they're putting the hammer in his hand and he can't swing it, and he has the one scene where he's like going like this, you know, like Toby Hooper has said, you know, he said in interviews that he thought people didn't get the humor in the original movie because it was so scary, and that's why he made the second one more of like a horror comedy. But he fully intended there to be humor, and I think that, you know, Drayton and the hitchhiker are just so much more lively a character than anyone else in that house. Like grouchy old man with no legs, grouchy old woman, you know, weird hillbilly woman with child, fat hillbilly woman. And it's like there's no personality to any of those other characters outside of Arlie Ermy, whereas the much smaller house of the original, with just Hitchhiker, Drayton, and Grandpa to go with Leatherface, every one of those four characters, you are like, they are in your face and you feel them. They have their own moments. And then, of course, in the sequel, you have Drayton is back. You have Chop Top just eating the scenery like crazy. Bill Moseley, like, basically putting himself on the fucking map in that movie. And you have Leatherface, of course. And so it's even a smaller family. It's just the three of them, really, in part two. But then you also add in Dennis Hopper. And so this movie really, I just felt like there's big, giant monster Leatherface, and there's Sheriff Hoyt, and no characters. While, yes, Jessica Biel is nice, she's a good final girl, I feel like a lot of people our age probably like this movie a lot because we got to see Jessica Biel run around in a white tank top for 95 minutes.
Yeah, that was nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you know, it's funny because like she chops off fucking Leatherface's arm in that first one, 2003, which that doesn't happen in any of the movies that I've seen, any of the sequels, where like, you know, he's like literally killed or you know, delimbed. But then in the second one, in the Texas Chainsaw the Massacre at the beginning, you know, I'm like, okay, wait a minute, they all have to die because there's a, this is a prequel, right? And then I gotta admit, like, that was a pretty fucking good ending when he like shows up behind Jordana Brewster and like gets her with the chainsaw through the seat.
Yeah, that was good. I like that ending. I will say the couple things about that movie. I thought it would have been a lot more interesting, and I think something that would be really cool that's never really been done is, and I thought they were going to do this with the Blonde, where they take somebody off of the, they kidnap somebody, and then you watch that person become a member of the family.
Yeah.
And instead, she's just there to end up getting her throat slit at the table. Okay, fine.
After all of her teeth are fucking mashed out, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I really hate the entire biker subplot of that movie.
Yeah.
First of all, we established that there's like no water, no food, or anything in this town anymore.
Yeah.
So they go to this one roadside thing, and there's like a biker convention in the back. But then, of all of those bikers, only one female biker chases down their RV to rob them.
Right.
And then only one biker is then seen ever again.
Right.
And that biker happens to be the boyfriend of the woman who was killed, who then walks in to promptly get killed. Like, oh, he's a challenge for the family, and then he gets thrown on top of a chainsaw and cut in half. And it's like, oh, great. So it's like, I feel like that was like Bikers Ex Machina, because they like the biker girl is kind of what sets the whole plot in motion.
Yeah.
And then they were like, well, we need some more gore. We need some more chainsaw usage. I will say that Texas Chainsaw Massacre at the beginning is probably the movie. If you want to see a chainsaw massacre in your Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies, that's probably the best one for you, because the brother gets chainsawed through the chest and like lifted above. Great visual. Jordana Brewster through the chest in the car. Matt Bomer through the, while Jordana Brewster's under the table. And then the biker dude gets like sawed in half. So that movie gives you the chainsaw massacre that you've been expecting since the first movie, where one person got killed with a chainsaw and you ever actually see the chainsaw one time.
Yeah, and come on, Uncle Morty loses both his legs with the chainsaw too.
Oh yeah, of course. I love the R. Lee Ermey line. We got to even him out.
Right. All right. Well, it looks like we are kind of in agreement with these movies and with these movies in general, right? Our ranking, I think, would be the same for these 6 Texas Chainsaw Massacre movies. I'm really glad that you got me to watch these, because I'd only seen the first one in my life. And so I know a lot of people talk about these movies. Now I have a better kind of understanding of the franchise. I'm still not checking out that fucking Netflix Texas Chainsaw Massacre. But
Some people really like it.
Yeah, not Danny though. So Danny, since we're kind of wrapping up this Texas Chainsaw Massacre thing, what else do we got going on our channel?
Well, like I said, Charlotte and I will, if I'm allowed to film the Q&A after the 50th anniversary screaming at MoMA, I will do that. I like to do that where I go to Q&As at movie theaters. I film them. I just saw Sleepaway Camp with writer-director Robert Hiltzik at the IFC Center. You could see that Q&A on our channel now. Yeah. So if not, then Charlotte and I will do a full review of Texas Chainsaw Massacre at MoMA next week. Aside from that, though, we just finished, as you mentioned earlier, our M. Nights of Summer. We covered 6 M. Night Shyamalan movies. We recorded our review of Trap, which just came out in theaters just before we started doing this review. And you can see all of our M. Night Shyamalan videos. There's the Robert Hiltzik Q&A after Sleepaway Camp up on the channel. I have a bunch of shorts. for a bunch of other movies I saw that are still out in theaters now, including Oddity. But yeah, if you like Interview with a Vampire, if you like Texas Chainsaw or M. Night Shyamalan, we've been hitting those three things really hard the last couple of months.
Yeah, man. Yeah. So check out our back catalog. Make sure you guys leave some comments. We love when you guys leave those comments. If you haven't subscribed already, please do. And Danny and I will be back next week. We got Alien Romulus coming up soon, too. So that's another one to look forward to.